I said that Joe Biden is not the lesser evil compared to Donald Trump for two reasons. One, objectively, Joe Biden just has a worse policy record. He has destroyed more lives in his 40 years in politics through policy than Donald Trump has in the 4 years that he's been president. So, on just the policy record, Joe Biden is the worse evil than Donald Trump. But also, there was another reason, something that I bring up regularly on the show, which is the insidious factor of the Democratic Party, because they have a way of tricking people and fooling people and making them believe that they're actually on their side, but in reality, they're doing the same harmful policies as the Republicans. So when they do this, it dramatically cuts the opposition to these same terrible policies because people think that they're on their side. So one of the and we're already seeing how this is going to play out during the Biden administration. So one of the things I remember clearly after Trump was elected was how much attention people were paying to the hires that he was making for his administration. I have never seen as many regular people so up to date on cabinet appointments and White House staff. I've never seen that. People knew the education secretary, the EPA administrator, secretary of state. People knew all these things that they usually just don't give a fuck about. They were paying attention and saying, hey, what? These are some giant conflicts of interest that we have here. You have people who have made a career doing the exact opposite of whatever the agency or department that they're in charge of in government is supposed to be doing. You're going to put these people in these agencies and these departments, and they're going to undermine it and use it to work on behalf of industry instead of the public, which is what they're there to do. The only reason a lot of these normie Democrats and the shit libs were even concerned about this is because Trump put such an ugly face on U.S. empire, and that veneer of respectability and decorum was gone, and they saw the U.S. government for what it actually was for the first time, a tool of corporations working against the public. Well, here we are, 2020. We have a new president-elect. This time it's a Democrat. And outside of the hardcore leftists, like on Twitter or whatever, I'm not really hearing any complaints from the normie Democrats or the shit libs about Joe Biden's cabinet picks, even though they're all just as horrendous and their record is just as disqualifying as many of the people that Trump hired for those same positions. Which brings me to the topic of this video. Joe Biden has announced that Michael McCabe, who was a former consultant for Dupont, the infamous chemical corporation, that guy is now going to be in charge of staffing the EPA. A guy who helped Dupont poison Americans across the country is now this man is now going to be hiring people, staffing up the Environmental Protection Agency. This is absurd on its face. I'm going to get into this, but you guys already know the deal. I love doing this show for you guys, but in order for me to keep doing it, it needs to be sustainable. So if you guys can help financially contribute, I have a link to my Patreon account in the About page of my YouTube channel. I also have a link to PayPal if you guys feel more comfortable doing a one-time contribution. And again, I'm incredibly grateful for all the people who have contributed to the show over the last few weeks and over the last few months. So any amount helps, $5, $10, $20. So all the links to contribute to the show is in the About page of my YouTube channel. Now back to this story. So let's talk about Michael McCabe, who, like I mentioned earlier, Joe Biden has picked to be part of his transition team, and he's in charge of staffing the Environmental Protection Agency. like I said, he was a consultant at Dupont, and one of the most infamous projects that he helped them with was a while ago there was this scandal about this chemical that they were using in their Teflon products, and this chemical was linked to cancer and other diseases, and DuPont was just recklessly dumping this chemical in drinking water, in people's drinking water, and destroying the environment, and ended up poisoning people. And while they were doing this, Michael McCabe was getting paid millions to help them skirt environmental regulations and to craft, quote, strategic communications for DuPont to help them deceive the public about what they were actually doing. And poisoning people is bad enough, but the extent of the poisoning and environmental destruction that DuPont was responsible for, it's hard to calculate, because this chemical that they were using, it's known as a, quote, forever chemical, and there's no way to get rid of it. So again, they were just dumping this recklessly in people's drinking water, and now that water is forever tainted and there's no way to clean it. And Michael McCabe was helping DuPont do this to American citizens for money. And now Joe Biden picks this guy to help staff the Environmental Protection Agency. So when asked about this conflict of interest, Joe Biden's team basically put out a statement. You don't have to worry about that. Don't worry about that, because you know what? Michael McCabe, the upstanding citizen that he is, he already recused himself from anything relating to that chemical, that specific chemical. Oh wow, bravo. And this is a trick that politicians like to use all the time. Donald Trump used it when he picked Rex Tillerson to be Secretary of State. Rex Tillerson at the time was the CEO of Exxon. So of course they have business interests all over the world, and that clearly poses a problem if that CEO is now going to be Secretary of State and in charge of U.S. diplomacy around the world. But Trump was like, he pulled the same move. He's going to recuse himself from anything having to do with Exxon. First of all, politicians lie all the time, so I don't believe you when you say, I'm just going to not do anything that could financially benefit me or the company that I was working at for decades. I don't believe you. And then on top of that, say you did stick to your word and you recuse yourself from anything having to do with Exxon. And same with Michael McCabe. You recuse yourself from anything that have to do with this specific chemical that was found in Teflon that DuPont was using. What's stopping you from doing favors for your other friends in the industry, or just doing favors for the industry in general that will de facto benefit the company that you just came from? So when I see picks like this, hires like this, and all the mental gymnastics and the hoops that politicians have to jump through to justify hiring somebody like this, and the veneer of respectability they try to put over the whole thing, and to make it not look as corrupt as it actually is. The first thought that comes into my mind is, you don't have to hire that person, right? You don't, they act like, there was 3 people in the entire planet we could hire to fill this position, and looks like this is the best choice, even though he has ties to the industry and has a record of doing heinous shit that run counter to the mission of the agency. But there were 3 people we could choose from, and we got best choice was Michael McCabe. There are thousands, tens of thousands of environmental scientists, environmental activists, people who have a record of protecting the environment and fighting against pollution. The list is endless. You could have hired anybody, but you hired him for a reason. You hired him because you know what he's going to do. You know he's going to do favors for the industry. You know he's in the pocket of industry. And at the end of the day, he's going to do what your donors want, without you having to directly tell him. And that's the reason why you hired Michael McCabe to staff the Environmental Protection Agency. Somebody who has helped Dupont poison this country. So this entire story is ridiculous. Not really seeing any of the normie Democrats, any of the shit libs who were so outraged, and they were constantly posting about Scott Pruitt and the other people that Donald Trump had at the EPA who were destroying the agency. They were undermining the agency, gutting the agency, working on behalf of polluters and industry to destroy the environment. Oh, we had a bunch of there was a lot of talk in liberal circles and among normie Democrats who don't really pay attention to politics. When it was Donald Trump destroying the EPA, oh, this is an affront to our good nature and to the entire country. We have to do something about it. Now that it's Joe Biden, like I said, the only people really talking about it is like the hardcore lefties, Democratic Socialists, the communists, the anarchists. Those are the only people actually saying anything about this. So this is a scandal. Just like all the other picks that Joe Biden has made, this is a scandal. We already have a crisis of tainted and poisoned drinking water in this country. We already have a crisis of environmental pollution making people sick around the country. And this is a person that you're going to pick to staff the EPA. Somebody who made millions destroying the environment, poisoning people, and will very likely, after he gets a role in this administration, go back to doing the same goddamn thing. How is this different from what Donald Trump was doing? How? You have goons from the chemical industry and the fossil fuel industry running the EPA, running Biden's environmental and climate policies, just like Donald Trump. You have warmongers, war criminals, people who do genocide for profit from the defense industry, now in charge of our foreign policy, just like Donald Trump. And you have deficit hawks and debt fearmongers coming in, neoliberals, austerity, people who believe in austerity policies coming into the Biden administration, people who believe in this trickle-down economics bullshit, just like Donald Trump's people. Now they're in the Biden administration, and like I said, they don't have anywhere near as much pushback as when it was Donald Trump doing the same shit. So this is going to be a very ugly 4 years, and I don't know what it's going to take to wake people up to and show them how terrible Joe Biden is. Joe Biden is going to let people poison you because that's what his donors want. And that's the president of the United States. And this is why I think the lesser of two evils voting and the harm reduction, I think those are the dumbest ideas to be introduced into American politics. Definitely among the left in American politics, because baked into those arguments is we kind of have to accept the status quo. We kind of have to, it might not be good, it might not be great, things might be bad, but all we're doing is making it so that it's less worse than what we think we're going to get with the other person. And like I said, that's just accepting the status quo and not being outraged and not drawing a line and saying this is unacceptable. Hiring somebody who made millions poisoning people in this country, giving them cancer and all of the kinds of diseases to staff the EPA, under no circumstances should that be acceptable. Whether Trump was the president before, whether it was Hitler the president before, whether it was choosing between somebody who's going to do that or somebody who's going to pick the CEO of Dupont to staff the EPA. Neither one of those things should be acceptable. Both of them cross the line. They're outrageous. They're outside of the bounds of what is reasonable. Should we poison a little bit more people or should we poison a little bit less people? That's not up for negotiation. We shouldn't be poisoning anybody. The EPA should be making sure that people aren't being poisoned. But when you believe that lesser of two evils bullshit, and when you see stuff like this, instead of being as outraged as you should be, instead of saying this is scandalous and why on earth is this even allowed, you just say, hey, it could be worse. And then you just keep on pushing. And then this continues to be, like I said, the status quo continues for years and years, indefinitely, because nobody's outraged enough. Everybody, all the people are asking for is you to be less bad than the other person who's going to fuck us over and actively try to kill us with destructive policies. This is insane. We are living in a nightmare.